Welcome to the Mason Duchatschek Show. I created it as a place where you can access expert ideas, strategies, and tools that can make you exponentially more valuable, if not indispensable, to the company you work for. And if you own a business, I want to help you make it much more profitable in the meantime and more valuable for down the road so you can attract more offers and bigger offers faster if you ever decide to sell it. My favorite topics are obviously related to business, people, and leaders who inspire them. Today, we're joined by Don Harkey. He's the CEO of People Centric Consulting Group. He's a masterful problem solver and creative strategist who's helped countless businesses unlock their potential. Don specializes in transforming workplace cultures, empowering leaders, and designing actionable strategies that drive results. With a knack for uncovering hidden opportunities and tackling tough challenges, Don has a wealth of insights and real-world success stories to share. Today, I'm hoping to extract a few gems and actionable ideas that all of us listening can learn from and put to good use right away. Don, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Mason. It's great to see you, man.
Good to see you too. Hey, before I start hitting you with a bunch of questions focused on business culture, which I know is your wheelhouse, I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about why that's so important. Could you talk a little bit about the rewards of having a high-performing culture and maybe contrast that with some of the consequences companies face when they screw it up?
Yeah, I've got a little bit of a weird perspective on that, I'd say, because I'm a recovering engineer. I think, as you know, I spent the first 10 years of my career in manufacturing and saw teams being really successful in some places and not in others. And so I got really interested in what causes that. So I started studying how do people work? How do people work really well? And I started studying the science of how people work. And what I was surprised to discover was the science is really well understood. We know what motivates people at work. But what is missing is how do you really apply that science? What's the engineering? How do you get that actually applied into a workplace where you can actually change something? We all know we need to do things like get the right people on the bus. How do you do that? What does that really look like? And so when we looked at the science, we came up with 7 what we call people-centric truths that are out there. And we realized that there was still something missing on top of that, which goes back to your question. And so the 8th people-centric truth that we lay out there is this idea of you are worthy. I think you're worthy of your time. I think you're worthy of your time at work. If you are an employee listening to this, I think you are worthy of having a great job. If you are a business owner listening to this, you are worthy of having a team of people that are aligned with you, working hard with you to get the results that you need as a company. That just makes the time that you spend at work better, and it makes it more profitable. And I think it's amazing that the world is created in such a way that if you do work the right way, your business makes more money at the same time. If your people are engaged and excited about what they do their job better. So it's not just like soft. Sometimes people have said, oh, well, you're the get along team, or you're trying to just get our team to be happy. It's like, I don't care if your people are happy. What I want them to feel is purpose and profit. And those two things go together really, really well.
It's amazing that sometimes happy goes along with that.
I think it's cool that it does, because we think about, like, I'm a big fan of like The Godfather, and they talk about, it's not business, it's personal, or it's not personal, it's business, I guess is the saying. And I think what's kind of neat is we've thought that we had to sacrifice something, like, well, it's business, so it's just go down to work and be serious about it. No, actually, if you have a little bit of fun and you're engaged in what you're doing, you do the work better. I think that's cool that the world works like that.
So what does a good culture look like to you? Can you share some stories or some examples? If a company's got it figured out and they're doing or on the way to figuring out, how would you describe them?
So a lot of times people think about things like potluck suppers and ping pong tables and things like that. We had a company that stopped us and said, an owner of a company said, hey, I put a basketball hoop in the back of our office, and it really didn't change anything in our culture. And I'm like, well, that's not the culture that I think you're looking for. You're looking for a culture where, and imagine yourself in this if you're a business owner. Imagine you show up to the office or you go out to the workplace, wherever you are at, and every day, the people that show up to work are focused on what they need to do to make the company successful. They know what their roles are. They're all in on their roles, and they do their thing. You feel like you're fighting with other people, working towards a common goal. You're aligned. And then the individual people on your team are empowered to do what they do really well. Nobody does everything well. So you have team members that do things that you don't do well. They do it really well. So then you're depending on each other. So we think about it being people-centric. The definition of that, it's a balance between empowerment and alignment. The empowerment is the individual being able to contribute their greatness to the company, which is great, but we need to balance that out with alignment, meaning that's also what the company needs. We need to move forward. If we get out of balance on that side note, if we have too much empowerment, you get entitlement. So it's not coddling your people.
Can you expound on that a little bit? Talk more about the entitlement, because That's a touchy subject for a lot of business owners.
Well, and I know a lot that they're hearing that, and a lot of the, generational issues that are happening in the workplace right now, people are like, so you're telling me like I have to coddle my people. We were working with an HVAC contractor, and we were just starting to talk, and one of their supervisors up front stood up and he says, so you're telling me I got to kiss my people's ass every day? And I said, no. I hope that's a podcast appropriate here for your listeners, but no, that's not what we're talking about. What we're saying is you can challenge your people and you can be nice to them at the same time. If you only coddle them, if you say, well, I'm sorry, you don't want to work on that, we'll take that over for you, or we won't hold our toxic people accountable, or sometimes we won't move people out. Good cultures fire people. They do. They fire people that don't fit. They move on from people. They hold people accountable. They have difficult conversations. They do all of those things because otherwise your people feel entitled and they just show up and do what they want to do. And that does not work. That's not success. That's why we talk about engagement instead of happiness. If all your people could be really happy. I've worked for teams where it's like, yeah, we let our people do anything they want to, and the employees are very happy and the company loses money. That's not a good business model. So you have to have a balance between alignment and empowerment. If you go too far on alignment, if you go to your team every day and you say it's about the company, it's not about you. I always think of those movies like in the 90s and 50s, they always talk about you have a responsibility to the company that hires you and things like that. What you get is disengagement. You get people who aren't excited about their job. They don't get to show up and they don't get to make an impact on the world that they have on a day-to-day basis. So listen, I know everybody that's out there listening to your podcast, and Mason, you're one of these people. You're a high-performing person. You like to go out and we like levers in our lives.
Yes,
Tell me the lever of the thing I can do, and I'm going to go 100%. Let's just go do this thing. But really, in this time from culture, there's more of a dial. And the dial is a balance. And we can dial it too high one way, or we can dial it too high the other way. And that's one of the things we teach businesses how to do, is how do you dial that in the right direction so that you get both people who are engaged and excited about what they do, but they're applying that to something that helps the company and the profitability.
Well, you know how you were talking about these, how did you phrase it? Getting rid of you said high performing companies get rid of toxic employees. Well, let's talk about the consequences of not getting rid of toxic employees, because there are a lot of companies that keep those folks around, and sometimes they even promote them and they drive off the good ones. Could you talk a little bit about the consequences of companies who, we're doing good enough and they don't want to make waves and the stuff that you see every day? Talk to me about the consequences and ramifications of keeping toxic employees.
Yeah, let me talk a little bit about some data, but people don't believe the data. So then let me share a story.
I'll take both.
Nobody ever believes the data. You say like onboarding turnover is really expensive, and people, you and I have talked about that a lot. They're like, but it's not really that expensive. And it's like, yeah, it really is that expensive. So, I mean, those are real things that have a big impact on your company. We read a study that says you could have a high performing team that's working together, and you drop one toxic person in a team of 20, and it will decrease the productivity of the entire team by 20-30%. One toxic person on a team of 20 highly engaged people. And if you think about it, like if you're a supervisor or manager, who do you spend your time thinking about when you're driving home? Who do you spend your time thinking about when you're about to launch something new or a new idea for your company? You think about, well, how's Janet going to react? Janet's going to be in the back, and Janet's going to fight back, and Janet's going to push back, and Janet's going to complain. So I have to be careful how I word this, and I can't think about like this. And then she's going to roll her eyes.
Walking on eggshells because of Janet.
And the better Janet is at her real job, which is a big problem, the worse her attitude has an impact on other people. It has just a huge impact. I was talking about this. Here's the story. I was talking about this with a group, and I had a business owner came to me and he says, Don, I have successfully isolated my toxic employee. So he is not having a negative impact on the company. And I said, well, first of all, congratulations. You've done something that many have tried and few have succeeded on. And I would just love to hear a little bit more about how you did that. And he says, well, we put this person in the corner of the office. They sit in the corner by themselves. We don't invite them to any of our meetings. They're very good at their individual job, but we just keep them isolated. We quarantine them away from the rest of the team. And it seems to work really, really well for our team. And I said, well, do me a favor. Over the course of the next week, just pay attention. Just really watch the interactions of your team around that toxic person. Just really observe. Be hyper vigilant for me for like a week. So he called me a week later and he says, you're not going to believe what I've seen. And I said, what did you see? And he said, well, we were out there working in the office in the morning. And he said, I looked around. He goes, and the office is just dead, like super low energy. Nobody's talking to each other. Nobody's collaborating or anything like that. And I'm just like, man, everybody must be really tired today. Well, the toxic person gets up and goes out back for a cigarette break. He's a smoker. So he goes out back in the alley. So he takes a step out. And he says, suddenly it's like a renaissance in the office. As soon as the guy stepped out, Like people started talking to each other. They started joking around. They started collaborating. There was the copy machine was next to where this guy sat. And he says, suddenly the copy machine comes alive. Like people had print jobs that they were going to run that they weren't running. They were holding off until that guy stepped out into the alleyway to run because they didn't want to have to run into that guy and have a conversation with him or listen to him complaining about how bad work was, or I can tell by the smile on your face, you haven't worked here long enough, or phrases like that he dropped frequently. And so they were running their print jobs and people are laughing and they're joking around. And then he walked in and he's like in the whole room just suddenly like leaving unfinished print jobs on the copy machine, fleeing back to the desk, and it goes dead quiet in the office. And the owner said, I knew it was really, the impact really struck me. He says at the end of that day, he went to leave and he parks in the alley behind their office, their space. So to go to that space, you would have to walk right by where that guy works and go out the back door. But he didn't. He walked out the front door and walked all the way around the building to avoid running into that guy. So that's the kind of impact. It creates unofficial systems, unofficial processes. It creates unofficial onboarding, unofficial training that are very real. We worked with a company and they had a brand new employee that came in, and on their second day at work, this person's second day, I got to meet them on their first day at work, young kid, super excited about coming in, right? He's up front taking selfies of himself out in front of the office. Like, I'm starting my new job, Mom. This is so fun. I'm going to love this. And on the second day he came in and he was on a project that we were working on together. And he had this terrible, like he just was down. Like you could just tell. Second day at work. And I said, what's going on, man? Well, you just seem down a little bit. And he goes, yeah. He goes, I just ran into Joe out in front. And I said, what happened? What happened with Joe? And he says, well, Joe's worked here for a really long time. And I said, yeah, Joe is working. He goes, and Joe is like, everybody points to him as he's the best person in our company. And he knows all these other things. And I'm like, yeah, that's impressive. And he says, well, Joe looked at me on the way in and he said, well, I could tell by the smile on your face, you haven't worked here long enough. He's like a demotivational speaker, right? Like I have so much respect for you, but I'm going to put up with, and so it sucks the life out of the room. So you have to deal with it. It's the stuff that you can see and the stuff you can't see. It impacts it's limiting your profitability.
The only thing worse than making a mistake is duplicating it. And if you have one toxic employee and you accept that, there's that old saying in management, you get what you accept.
Well, you know why toxic people keep coming back to work even though they hate their job?
Because you pay them.
Because you literally pay them to do it, right? You are literally giving them a thank you card every other week and you're signing your name on the bottom of it and they can cash that in for money. That's why they keep coming back. So we coach people to have a conversation with them. And it looks like this. If you're having I'm assuming you want me to go the next round. How do you fix the problem?
Please, I do. Yep.
You want to fix the problem.
Your mind reading skills are on point today, Don. What do you got?
Okay. All right. I'm just watching you and I've known you for a long time. So I'm like, we're just rolling with
We're
this.
good. Keep rolling.
So how do you fix this problem, right? So if you've been working with Joe for a while, and I assume as a manager, by the way, that you've had some conversations with Joe about his attitude. You can assume that, but I also from experience, I know that many of you haven't. Many of you have never told Joe that you don't like his attitude. Many of you are soft stepping around Joe. If you're doing that, you're making a big mistake. And step one is you need to start talking to Joe. You need to start telling Joe, hey, Joe, listen, man, we just launched this new thing in the meeting and I saw you roll your eyes and cross your arms to the whole thing. People really look up to you. Like that's having a big impact on the rest of the team. We can't do that. Like I need you to stop doing that. So you need to have those conversations. If you've had those conversations with Joe and Joe still hasn't changed, we talk about having what we call a watershed conversation. And it looks like this. It says, Joe, listen, you've been on this team for a long time. You are very good at your job. And so people look up to you. You are a leader on this team, whether you look at yourself as one or not. And right now you're leading them in the wrong direction. You're leading them to hate their jobs. You're leading them to feel bad about their work. You're leading them to feel bad about even coming into work today and doing what they do. You're hurting our team. My job is to protect our team. I can't let you do that anymore. So I want to give you a choice. I want you to go home tonight. I want you to think about this and come back tomorrow and tell me what you want to do. Choice number one is you realize that you're a leader on the team and you start acting like a positive leader, which means you don't have and be specific. Don't roll your eyes when I make suggestions. Don't have the after meetings that toxic people tend to lead after meetings and tell people how stupid an idea was. I need you to be a positive leader in this company. If you choose to do that, then listen, let's talk about what's gotten you upset. If you're upset about things or you don't like about this, I'll give you some time. We'll set up a standing meeting, where we'll talk about it. Let's work through all those challenges with each other. But for in front of the rest of the team, you show up as a different human being starting tomorrow. Your second choice, if you just can't do that, if you go home tonight and you say, man, I can't stand Harkey, I don't want to work for that guy anymore, or I can't stand the company, or I can't stand what's going on, or whatever it is, I'm totally fine with that. Just come back and tell me that so we can figure out how to offboard you. So you think about that conversation. What you've done is you've given the other person a choice. If they choose path number one and they come back with a good attitude, you have to keep working with them. You have to keep reflecting them if if that attitude starts to slip. You have to sprinkle in some accountability in there, which means you have regular conversations and reflecting that back. But if they decide to improve, then you win. If they decide to quit because they can't stand it anymore, you also win. I have never seen a team where somebody walks out and you might think, well, that person knows too much. They know too much. They're too good at their job. I have not yet seen a team where that person was so good at their job that when they left, the rest of the people didn't step up to take it over. You know, you've been on teams, Mason, where you've had somebody
That's a good point.
Toxic who left and everybody was like, I will pick up the slack. If that person is gone, we will figure it out.
You know, it's funny. It's like you even go to some of those employees and you say, well, hey, here's this project. How long will it take you? And if I get so-and-so to help you, and they'll tell you 2 hours. Well, what if you did it by yourself? An hour. I can get it done in a fraction of the time.
That'd be preferred, actually. I would prefer to do that. We work with a company that they had a really toxic salesperson who had, let's just say 50% of the sales. And so they were like, we can't fire that person. They have half of our sales. Like, we're going to lose half of our sales. We can't do that. But that person was so toxic, they were meeting with new salespeople that would come in and taking them to lunch. They'd be like, so Mason, hey, you just started, it's first day in the company. Can I take you to lunch today? And you're like, yeah, let's go to lunch today. And then that salesperson would sit down with you and say, Mason, I just want you to know that you will not be successful here, that I'm going to crush you, that you're not welcome here. Anybody that you talk to, I'm going to go after them better than you are. And I'm better than you are. You are like, they would have a meeting telling them how they were going to destroy them. And so they couldn't figure out why they were cycling through so many salespeople and they weren't lasting for very long. So finally they had the conversations they needed to have. They offered the watershed. That person decided to quit. She quit. How much of their sales do you think they lost?
None.
They lost none. Not only did they not lose any of their sales, but when they started to, the other sales reps obviously jumped up and said, hey, we'll help whatever we need to do. They started calling the clients that this person had. And then they started talking to their customers. Guess what the customer said? They were like, boy, we thought you'd fire her a long time ago. She does not speak well of you. Like this person hates you. Like, you should hear what they say about you guys. I'm really shocked that you guys have held on to her for as long as you have. We overestimate the positive impact a toxic person makes on our team, and we underestimate the negative impact that we have. That's a regular mistake that team leaders make.
That's an interesting observation. And it's fascinating to me. We affectionately refer to that as top salesperson's disease. I generated $2 million worth of sales revenue for this company last year. You can't fire me. You can't. It's like, no, dude, we got you in a territory where you should be producing $5 million a year in sales. So you're really costing us $3 million. You're not making us $2 million.
Yeah. And congrats on your success, but humble up a little bit. Anybody on this, anybody listening here who's got it all figured out, Mason, I would love to hear from you, because
I would.
We don't have it all figured out. Like, nobody's got it all figured out. We're all learning from each other. So like, what a lonely world to be the only person that is right about everything. Because I've tried to go to those meetings and I just don't see a lot of people there.
Talk to me a little bit like in helping a company go through the transformational process from a less than ideal culture to one that is closer to what you would consider ideal. I know you have different systems involved in building high performing teams that are people centric in nature. Can you talk a little bit about those systems, what they do and why they're important?
Yeah. So the secret of changing culture is you don't work on culture. And that throws people off. I've seen so many companies. We had a manufacturing company that called and they said, hey, Don, we're going to announce our new culture next week. And they had bought some book about culture, and their executive team had been meeting for 6 months reading this book. This is so common. This is I'll just go buy a book. We're going to do the most important thing in our company. We don't go read a book about accounting and then think we can suddenly do accounting, but we do this about culture. And they said, we're going to announce our new culture. And then they gut checked that and they said, this is stupid. This isn't going to work. You can't just go tell people this is the new culture. You don't work on culture. What you do is you work on systems that impact culture. And we've identified. For
example, can you give me some examples?
Yeah, let me give you. We look at 5 sets of systems that impact culture. So there's the first set is the people set of systems that impact culture. The people set of systems include how you hire people, how you onboard people, role design. It's how your org chart looks. Do I have multiple bosses or do I have one boss? If I have multiple bosses, I have unclear expectations. That's going to lead to a bad culture. If I have one boss who holds me accountable to things, I'm going to be, that's a good culture. If I'm onboarded well, if I'm welcomed on my first day of work, That's good culture. If I'm hired well and you talk about the values and high performance and things that we need to do, then that's going to lead to a good culture. The second set of systems are communication systems. It's how do I get the information I need? It's how do we break down silos in our organization? We just started working with a manufacturer. They have sales who sells the thing, then they have engineering who designs the thing, and then they have manufacturing who makes the thing. Those three groups don't talk to each other a lot at that company. They just kind of lob things over the wall to each other. So what happens is that creates the word they. And they means somebody on our company, in our team, but in that department. So if I'm in manufacturing, they mean sales and engineering, and they don't do the things with us. All you have to do in that is you create places for them to meet. You just create a place. Let's talk. How can we work better together? What do we all care about? Oh, we care about the same thing, which is working with that client and creating a great product. Let's work together. Those are communication systems. So those are systems that you can create that help people communicate more effectively.
It's interesting you talk about that and the silos. I was in Cartagena, Colombia, a month or two ago, and I was with a friend of mine who's a serial entrepreneur, very, very successful, and he invited me to sit down, and he was staying at a 5-star resort and was talking to the manager in charge, and we had breakfast together. And the manager was a young guy and super sharp. I really, really liked him. He took good notes, etc. But some of the questions my friend Bob was asking this general manager was questions like, how many times have you stayed in your hotel as a guest? How many rooms have you cleaned by yourself? How many times have you worked the front desk, a shift at the front desk? How many times have you worked the front as a server in your restaurant? How many times have you worked? And in the case of the hotel, he had actually spent, he's saying he said 4 nights in there. So that was a good sign. But he literally had him said, look, your reception staff has a different experience than your front desk staff, than your waiters and servers in the restaurant. And if they don't understand what they are doing, one group of they doesn't understand what the other group of they is doing or why it's doing, then there's missed opportunities for collaboration, for efficiency improvements, and for collaboration and teamwork. So when you start talking about communications, that's what he was trying to get down to, so that there was he wanted that general manager to understand that there is some common ground that they all share, and that is service to the customer. And they all have different roles in how that is provided. But it was the aha moment that general manager had when he's like, it would be a good idea. And heaven forbid you had cross-trained employees as a healthy byproduct that could pitch in because they understood. But that wasn't the main point. But the purpose was to break down silos and to increase understanding, collaboration, and cooperation, and improve communication. And literally, it was like having the people do the different things, so that it wasn't a theoretical exercise of, it looks like they do that, but they've experienced it and they understand why.
Yeah, and what they need to do is systematize that, right? Because culture are habits. And it's habits you have whether you mean to have them or not have them, right? We all have habits, and some of them are deliberately installed, some of them are undeliberately installed. Companies do the same thing. Like I've seen companies do that. We've worked with hotels before. If I go to a general manager at a hotel chain and I say, hey, why aren't you staying in your own hotel? I also that's not his problem that he wasn't doing that. There was no system to do that. Now, what if we installed a system to do that? What if when he was onboarded as a general manager at a hotel, we had a process where he followed a 6-month cycle where he spent time, okay, you're going to work in housekeeping for a week. And then you're going to work on the front desk for a week. And then you're going to work in the kitchen for a week. And you're going to work, you're going to work at the front with the valets for a week. If you had a system for that, then your individual people don't have to figure that out. Now you can replicate that culture. Now you can expand it. Now you can work it through. I think that's what happens when small companies become bigger ones, is they lose a lot of that culture, because as their company grows, they feel the lack of systems. If you have 10 people on your team, it's really easy to turn around and say, hey, you should go do this. But if you have 100 people on your team, suddenly you're relying on those systems. So you're absolutely right. The communication systems are really important, but the word system is what's key to a lot of that stuff. Is it's like, you can say, yeah, he should have gone and done that. But why would you think he would go do that? Why would you think he would figure that out as an owner? Like, you should put the system in place to help him with that. So yeah, I like that story a lot.
Didn't want to interrupt your mojo there. You were talking about your systems and you were talking about communications, and I interrupted you. So
no, I like that because it highlights systems. So like the third set of systems are management systems. We have to stop taking people who are good at their first jobs and promoting them to their next job, which is being a supervisor, manager, director, owner of a company, without training them how to do that. I don't know why we do that. If I go to work at McDonald's and I learn how to make French fries, they put me through a multiple day training program on how to make French fries. Then you promote that same person and you become a manager. And many times, even at some of those big companies like that, they don't train the person. They don't really give them training on how to have difficult conversations. What's that job look like? And then they don't give them very many systems for when do I have those conversations? So we talk about things like performance management systems and not annual performance appraisals. Those are very broken. Those traditional systems are very outdated. They're very away from the science. But I'm talking about systems where supervisors sit down and ask employees, how are you as a human? How are things? What do you need from me? What does it look like? Like, where are you trying to go next in your career? It's connecting the person's why and training the managers how to have those resources. Not just as frontline either. We see supervisors then become managers, they become directors, they become mid-level managers. That's a different job. But I see a lot of managers and directors act like they're frontline supervisors and think that their day-to-day is to be out in front where all the fires are occurring. And then nobody's being strategic. We have to train them how to be strategic. How do you think about how you design your organization? How do you think bigger picture? How do you think about systems? And then even executives, how do we train you how to be an executive? You have to be financially literate. You have to understand the things in your company of how to run them, and you have to be trained on that stuff. So those are management systems. We also talk about process systems. That's the fourth set of systems. And that's how do you improve things? Most companies are aware of how to improve things. What most companies struggle with is how do I engage people to improve things? So if I work at that hotel and I see the problem every day and I'm at the front desk, and those front desk people see a lot of problems.
Absolutely.
They're the hub of all of it, right? They get called when housekeeping doesn't do something right. They get called when the kitchen doesn't do something right. They're getting a lot of that stuff. If I have to live with those problems on a day-to-day basis, but I have no mechanism for solving those problems or floating those things out there, then I'm missing something in my culture. Then I get frustrated and I lose that. So we talk about process systems for how do you engage your people to identify and then engage problems that they can solve and move those forward. And then the last set of systems are the strategy systems. This is kind of the fuel system. This is the one that gets your people excited. It's why the heck are we here, right? It's more than just strategic planning. Strategic planning is a fine activity, but it's more about it's your mission, your vision, your values. It's why, what are you looking for? Using your hotel example, big picture, like if you're at your front desk, what's the mission of a front desk person if you don't feed them, if you don't tell them anything? It's to get through the line of people that are in front of them, right?
It's like asking them to play a sport like basketball and to throw a pass, but you don't know if they caught it. It's take a shot, but you don't know if it goes in.
That game wouldn't be blindfolded. Yeah, you can't, like, what happened? I thought I heard some pins. I don't know what happened. How do I adjust? How do I get better? So you have to think about, like, what goals are we setting, both for the company, for the team, and for the individual? How do we track those goals? What's winning really look like? What we see, Mason, is, and look, we're onto something that's different here. Like I've really spent a lot of time watching other consulting groups work and how they work and had conversations with them, and they haven't figured out what we figured out. And there's some big ones out there that haven't figured out. They'll go in and they'll tell companies, oh, you should do this better. You should do this better. You should do this better. But they're missing that systematic approach of these are the things that we can walk along with you to install that will help you to do things more replicatable over long periods of time. And our average client in the first year sees a 20 to 30 point bump in their engagement scores, which is massive.
It is massive.
We haven't seen anybody else do that.
It's massive. I was at a client not too long ago, and we were talking about employee engagement. And I asked him, I said, what's your payroll on an annual basis? And he said, well, it's 10 million. And I said, what do you believe is a discretionary effort of your average employee? He's like, about 60%. I said, so you're paying 10 million a year for labor, but you're getting $6 million worth of work done for it. I said, that sounds like a $4 million a year profit leak. I said, if someone was embezzling $4 million a year from your company, how long would you wait to fix it? And who would you delegate to handle it? I'd fix it right now and I'd take care of it myself. Question is how, which is where you fill in the gaps.
And you can do some really weird things when you do focus on this. And it's just, people are just starting to figure this out because of the shortage in the labor market right now. They're starting to recognize it used to be a nice to have kind of thing. People look at that, like we can handle turnover because we can always make more. We can go find some more people. And now companies are struggling to find people. So they're taking this a little bit more seriously. And we've seen some companies do some really weirdly amazing things with their culture. And I'm talking
like
about,
what? Give me some examples.
So like in the hospital space, we work a lot in the hospital space and medical space. The average turnover nationally, like in a hospital for first year, is in the 30-something percentile. Like a first year new employee at a hospital, they see like 30-something% turnover, really high. And overall, it's like 25%, 26% turnover. So if you imagine, especially like your hospital in a small community someplace, and you are the major employer in that space, how do you hire all of your new people every 4 years? Like that's a lot. That's a lot of people to hire. We've worked with hospitals who have worked with those systems and train our managers up and get people in the right places and think about making sure that the roles are designed really well and that we have a good span of control and we have good decision discipline up and down the organization, strategic planning, all those things. We've got hospitals that we work with that have pushed their turnover down below 10%. We have one that hired 200 people over the course of the last year, and their turnover was less than 10% total, which
That's awesome.
statistically, it should have been unbelievably higher than that. So what does that allow them to do? It allows them to expand, add new services, think about new things that they're doing. Where other hospitals that we've seen that we come in from the outside and look at, when you're experiencing 25% turnover, they're just trying to backfill all the jobs that they have open. That's all they're doing right now. Like we have so many jobs open and we have hundreds of jobs or thousands of jobs open. We can't fill those jobs and they're just trying to plug the leak. The companies that did this 10 years ago are in an unusually successful competitive position right now. The companies that are doing it now are doing it in a way that they're going to survive and try to figure out, okay, we're going to weather what's happening right now. We will survive it, but it's going to be hard. The companies that are thinking about doing this in the future aren't going to be around to try it.
Gotcha.
I just realized there's such a shortage in people right now. We're not making enough workers in the US right now. There's literally a shortage. We did not make enough babies. And those of us with kids, we know it takes about 20 years to make a worker. If you have more questions, that'll be a different podcast episode. Some of us with older kids, it takes a little longer than that. I get it. All right. Some of us have kids in college that are still working on that. But 20 years ago, we did not make enough babies in the US. And the consequence is for the first time in any of our lifetimes, there are more jobs available than there are unemployed people. If we took every unemployed person and we gave them a job in the US, which would be 100% labor efficiency, there would be 2 million job openings left. So 2 million unfilled positions for companies that are trying to grow, trying to invest, trying to think about what they're going to do next. And they're trying to fill those baby boomers that are retiring at a rate of 10,000 per day. That's what's happening right now. We call that the perfect storm, Mason, because it's having a massive impact on companies and you feel it. You see restaurants that are closed on days when they're not supposed to be closed. You see companies that are unable to grow. You see companies that can't do things that they used to do.
It's funny you say that. I went to have my oil changed a month ago. 1 month ago, I went to have my oil changed. It was the middle of the day. It was a busy street in Wichita, Kansas, prime location. I pull in the middle of the day and I've gone to this place numerous times. They do a great job. And I pulled up and this guy comes walking out and he says, "I'm sorry, I can't change your oil today." I'm like, "What do you mean?" Because I'm the only one that showed up for work today. He was the assistant manager. And instead of spending his day managing people to change oil, he literally had to turn away customers. And their marketing department did a great job. I got the email with a special offer, come on in and get it changed. I mean, marketing got me there. I made a special trip there and they couldn't fill my oil. So they didn't make money. They were spending money. They were paying for the overhead. The lights were on. They were paying that guy to be there. And to have to tell customers, "I can't help you. You need to go somewhere else." And I was astonished.
Devastating.
And I asked later and found out after the fact that they actually pay really well in the area, surprisingly enough. And
they have to.
My first reaction was, why isn't the manager here?
Yeah,
this is the assistant manager. Where's the manager? And turns out the manager quit. So that poor guy the manager quit, left that poor assistant manager by himself, and no one else showed up. I felt awful. And this is not this is a chain that's big. And I was astonished that in this day and age, "I'm sorry, we can't help you. I'm the only one that showed up for work."
So it's labor musical chairs. So somebody's going to be without a chair. So I run a company where I've been investing in this for a long time. I'm a great place to work. I've got low turnover and all those things. I go to do that. And my first thing I'm going to say to that guy is say, "By the way, you don't have to work here." Right. And people are recruiting like that. Like, you don't have to be unhappy like that. You don't have to be here. You're fighting this job. Like I'm impressed with that guy that he showed up and was out there and he did the things.
I was too.
Like kudos to that dude.
For him.
My advice to that guy is go find a different job. And these companies that aren't doing the right things are not going to survive it. And what's kind of cool for me is yes, that's terrifying from a business perspective and from a perspective of we use a lot of those companies. Like I fly a lot, and not to name any companies, but doors are flying off of Boeing airplanes because they forgot to put the bolts in them. Oh, I forgot. I just named the company, didn't I? Well, I should name. that company should no longer exist. Side note, that's my opinion, not the opponent, not Mason's opinion. They have not only do they have such a bad culture, but they have crooked management. They paid their way out of it. They've killed people with their bad culture because they have fear and things. And I mean, that's bad. And I fly a lot, and I fly on a lot of Boeing planes. And if you work at Boeing, I'm sorry, but I'll bet you also don't disagree with me. I like that we're in a competitive environment where the companies that do take care of their people, that show really good, that show that are people centric, but they're people at the center of their organization, are going to win. They're going to have better service. And it's going to be scary and hard when you go to get an oil change and you can't. But we're all seeing things like that, where you go to fly on a plane and the door flies off. They forgot to put the bolts on, Mason. It's like such a basic thing. If they didn't
easy to do, easy not to do.
There's so many layers of controls that failed for that to happen. And then they couldn't even explain why it happened because nobody had filled out the reports. Nobody put like the security camera footage in. I mean, you look at it and then people are like, well, it's just process problems. It's not a process problem. It's a culture problem. And the culture problem started with their management.
I got it. Don, I'll tell you what, I'm really enjoying this conversation, and I have a whole bunch more questions for you. And what I'm wondering is if we can pick up this again next time and do another one of these, because I really enjoy the conversations that I have with you. I appreciate your insights and your wisdom and your experience and your willingness to share it. But so as we wrap today's session up, if there was one piece of advice you could give to any business owner or manager, I'm a huge fan of Tony Robbins, and I was listening to a seminar of his, and someone asked him the question, if there's one piece of advice you could give, what would it be? And I was fascinated because he gives so much valuable advice. What is it? So I'm going to turn the tables on you and ask the same question. Given your life experience, what if you could only give one piece of advice to businesses, what would it be and why?
Yeah, I think it's to invest in your people. And I know that sounds self-serving because you all know I'm a consultant, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean just hiring us to do whatever it is that to help you with your culture. But so I don't know why that became, you hire an accountant to work with your accounting stuff. You hire HR people on the outside if you're big enough to help you with stuff. You hire attorneys to help you with that stuff. I don't know why we don't think about businesses, put that on the side of like how people work. Like just don't tolerate showing up to work every day and your team not doing the things that they need to be doing. You don't have to put that in. Invest into it and fix those systems, make that better. Don't tolerate bad work. And same thing if you're an employee. If you go to work every day and it's miserable and they're not changing anything, go find something else. Like go invest in yourself, and invest in the people side of things. I think let's put people at the center of every organization and it'll change your life. You spend 40% of your time at work. Let's be happy while you're there.
Gotcha. So Don, it's been a pleasure visiting with you today, and I appreciate you sharing your time, talents, and wisdom. If people want to know more about you, your company, and the work you do, please take a minute to tell them what's the best way to connect with you.
Yeah, you can check out, we've got a great website, peoplecentric.com. You can check that out. We also have our own podcast. We have the People Centric podcast available anywhere you get your podcast. There's over 200 episodes on there. And you can check out a lot of stuff on there. It's our team talk. We get great feedback from that. So those are a couple ways to connect, or just reach out to me. My contact information's all on there. We'd love to talk with you.
Cool. Don, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thanks, Mason. Great to see you.